Okay, I'm here without much of a warning. I was going to give no warning, but then I figured, well, I'll give a warning. So I have this illustration here. This is actually an ammonite, but I want to use it to describe time and space, the dilation of time and space. So if you see it spirals down to the center, that's kind of like a black hole because time and space is spiraling into a black hole. It's being dragged into a a black hole. But the point is that in the very center there would be a huge amount of matter, and which has mass, of course. And of course, we don't know what kind of matter it is, but it's matter, and it, according to our mathematical equations, it takes us to infinity as far as in, which doesn't make sense because it's infinite density in in uh, in no time and place. But it's an actual physical thing. And then if you spiral out, then your rate of time is is getting faster and faster. So your your rate of time is like getting would be approaching infinitely, or at least with a photon, it's infinite. You know, it's already there. It's instantaneous. In other words, so it's actually increasing the speed of light, which is another wormhole. But I mean, wormhole. It's another rabbit hole or can of worms. Getting everything all twisted up. It's another can of worms, but it would be like instant speed of light. Of course, speed of light is instant with a photon. Photon takes no time to travel no distance. It's already there because that's what the speed of light is. That's what infinity is. It's, you know, infinite speed. So it's almost like infinite existence. Whereas the black hole would be, no existence. But we do know there's matter there, because it accumulates and there's no. It's a physical fabrication, and there's no loss of. There's conservation of energy. There's no loss of anything. No loss of information. No loss of energy. So I'm going to suggest a real cause for the universe. Um, and of course, I have the real cause as being energy here, but I'm not there yet. So what we need to do, we need to forget this idea of something from nothing, because nothing ever came from nothing, and something never came from nothing. We got to follow the evidence that we have. We don't have evidence of something from nothing. We have evidence of an apparent expansion, which I hope to explain as well. But we have to go with the evidence that we have. We have to go with what we know. We know that time and space is from the energy that made matter that leads us to infinity, as I'm trying to illustrate with the ammonite. It's an infinite spiral of time and space to infinite density and no time and no distance. But that infinite density has a size to it, because there's different sizes of black holes. As I already explained, there's no evidence of a wormhole because there's no information is lost, and there's the conservation of energy. Whatever goes into a black hole contributes to the size of a black hole. Nothing is disappearing, and so these black holes around the universe, distributed around the universe, are like 3D tent pegs that are stretching time and space. So it's not a two-dimensional tent peg, it's a three-dimensional tent peg stretching time and space, if you can imagine that. But they are tent pegs, and they are stretching time and space, and they're like pulling time and space into the black hole, which is probably the reason for the vacuum of space. So a lot of people don't like the fine-tuning argument. And if you don't like the fine-tuning argument, well, just understand that each of the elements of the table of elements has to have the properties that it has. Think about that a little bit. There's 17 of the most common elements are essential to life, and each of the elements have their own properties that no other element has. So there's 17 different elements. Each one has a property that's essential to your existence. 17 of them. And they're the most common elements. And an additional amount of elements, the common elements, are beneficial to life. And when we say beneficial, we know that something that's beneficial could save your life. And in many cases does save your life. Because silicon isn't essential for our life, but without it you can't live. So some of the beneficial elements are actually essential too, just not as a part of the ordering of life. But it's still essential because that's what we stand on. So keeping in mind that the fine-tuning of the universe has to be just right. Like I said, some people have a problem with fine-tuning, but then you really can't have a problem with fine-tuning because each of the elements are essential to your existence. Each of the properties of the elements are essential to your existence, the most common elements. So that's an illustration or a demonstration of fine-tuning right there. So, and you never saw a working part make itself. Which part of your car made itself? Which part of your house made itself? Which part of your body made itself? Of course, all matter was made by energy. So keep it in mind, the fine-tuning of the universe has to be just right, and random selection is more likely to fail than succeed. If you were to take, now this is biology, of course, that I'm talking about. It's a little bit off topic, but it has to do with the universe too, because that has to do with the fine-tuning of the universe. So the random selection is more likely to fail than to succeed, because of there's just mathematically there's not enough time or distance or space for random selection to make anything, any directed working thing. And each directed working living organism has different instructions. So then you have compounded problems because you're going to have to make each of the instructions for each different directed working mechanism, which is a series of directed working mechanisms itself. So that all has to do with the fine tuning too. Okay. So yeah, a lot of people are not sure, about themselves, or not sure in their, what about the evidence, or whether or not it proves that there's fine tuning, whether or not things have to be exactly the way they are for us to exist. Atheists aren't sure. We know that atheists aren't sure because atheism can't tell you what is. It only claims to say what is not. So they're not sure. They don't even know what is. They can't even say what is. And if they do say what it is, if they say they're naturalists, then they're not atheists, they're idolaters, because they're attributing everything to physical objects, which is idolatry, which is part of what I'm showing here with the fine tuning and the random selection being more likely to fail than to succeed. Besides being more likely to fail than succeed, it also falls apart faster than it puts itself into directed working order. And we still have people that are unsure. We still have skeptics and agnostics that say they don't know about any intent or purpose in life, in everything that we see. Of course, everything that we see is made of the same table of elements, the same table of elements that's essential for our existence. So that are essential working parts, and we know that no working part ever made itself. Okay. So a lot of people are unsure of themselves, or unsure of the evidence of intent and purpose and direction. So we have to go with the what the evidence is. Let's just go with what this straight evidence is. Nothing more than what's observable. Okay, so the evidence is that energy made matter. We know that matter is the result of energy, and that matter has mass, and mass has gravity. And gravity dilates time and distance to the point where physical events can happen. Physical things can occur, where events can occur. And the gravity being as great as it is, with huge amounts of gravity, huge amounts of matter which have a lot of mass, is what drags time and space into black holes. So it is stretching on the universe, stretching on time and space. And we actually live in a gravitational well. A lot of people talk about gravitational wells, but we are in a gravitational well because we have limited time and distance, which is the result of the infinite reach of gravity, because gravity, the force of gravity is infinite. So gravity has an infinite reach, and so we have these tent poles around the universe that are the cause of time and space that we experience. the rate of time that we experience, and the measure of distance that we experience. It's a fabrication of limited time and distance, and that's where physical events can take place, which makes possible the nanotechnology inside of us, and the direction inside of us for us to grow and to live. So that's all possible by the time and space, which is possible from the gravity well, which is the result of the black hole, which is stretching on time and space and dilating time and space so that things can occur, so that biological organisms can function, because events have to occur. For nanotechnology to occur inside of us, by direction, you have to have time and space, limited time and space, and it's all made possible by our Goldilocks zone that we live in on the Earth, in the middle of time and space. So we got this three-dimensional tent that's called time and space that's being stretched out, and the evidence that we see is that matter is programmed in living organisms. Okay, so we have a question here. We observe all of creation, all of the result of what energy has done, what power has done. And of course, atheists say there is no power, there are no powers. But if there was no powers, then there wouldn't be any matter for any of this to take place. So right there, they're wrong to begin with. Their only claim is a claim of what is not, and they fail. Their only claim that the atheists make, is wrong. So this power, which makes matter, which has mass and dilates time and space, this power is the result of energy, and Stephen Hawking says that the universe is possible because of gravity, which is really strange, because you can't have gravity unless you have matter, and it takes power to make matter. And of course, Lawrence Krauss is wrong too, because he's talking about a fluctuation. You have a fluctuation. The fluctuation he's talking about is the result of an existing time and space, an existing universe. That fluctuation is from an existing universe. You can't have a fluctuation without the energy that makes time, space, and matter. So the greatest scientists in the world are all wet. They're all wrong. They suppose, of course, Lawrence Krauss isn't that great. Never was that great anyway to begin with, but that's another story. But they make Stephen Hawking out to be this great guy, this intellectual mind and everything, and he probably does understand quite a lot. He's the one with the Hawking radiation. Not too many people have a theory after their name. But that Hawking radiation, of course, is a very, 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 very small amount to begin with. It's an evaporation of a black hole, which is very, very, very small. Very, very, very little, which is meaningless to us, basically. So it'd be like a glow coming from something. It's even less than that, probably. So the evidence that we see is that energy made matter, made mass, made gravity, made time and distance, stretches out the universe like a tent, three-dimensional tent, and it makes possible our existence. But we still have this question. We have this question of about the programming that's written inside of us. Not only our programming, which is different from every other programming that's in every other living organism, because we are copies of our ancestors, which is not the same copy of what everything else is. Other living organisms have their own copy. They're copied from their ancestors, which is not the same as our ancestors because it's not a copy. Because if it's not a copy, doesn't have a common ancestor with anything else. So we're copied from humans, and that copy is a copy. You can't have extraneous information from chimps in there. You can't have extraneous information from an elephant or a whale in there. And whales and hippos or whatever don't have information for a whale either. It's extraneous information. If you were to compare the genome side by side, and if you see extraneous information in there, it's not a copy, and doesn't have a common ancestor. And of course, the Y chromosome of chimps is totally unrelated to us anyway, to begin with. So we have this problem of information, where the information came from. And if you want to claim infinite possibilities, that's basically a claim to God, because people like to claim, well, this universe was made by another universe, which was made by another universe and another one, and this universe happened to be just right. Well, you're still not accounting for the energy or the power, where the power came from. And if you do, it's going to lead you to an infinite potential. You have to have infinite potential for that sort of thing. I mean, you're only appealing to greater and greater power. And if you appeal to greater and greater power, you're appealing to infinite potential, infinite possibilities. You can't have infinite possibilities in limited time and space, because limited time and space is not the realm of infinite possibilities. And of course, if you know what infinite is, you know that infinite possibilities can't happen in the limited time and space that we have in this universe. It might seem a lot. It might seem there's a lot. It might seem infinite, but it's not. And if it is, you're appealing to an infinite potential. And infinite potential is not the realm of limited time and distance. So, and you're not getting instruction anyways. You got to get instruction. And instruction is infinite potential, which is infinite wisdom, infinite understanding, infinite power, infinite knowledge. You're appealing to God. It's an appeal to God. Infinite understanding, power, wisdom, might, strength. It's an appeal to God. So when you do appeal to infinity or infinite possibilities, you're appealing to God, because that's what the evidence shows. And that's what, if you're following the evidence, and you are following the evidence, you're appealing to greater and greater power, then So you're appealing to God. Of course, you can't only have power, you have to have wisdom, you have to have understanding, you have to have all those things, which is the definition of God. So that means that of course, that the goat herders were right. The goat herders that you malign so much have been right, were right thousands of years ago. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. And that's exactly what the secular scientists have done. They have rejected the chief cornerstone. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. So by following the evidence of infinite possibilities, which they keep going back and back and back, they say you keep going back and it's a physical cause. It's a physical cause. Except that it's not true. Because the energy has to come from a greater and greater potential. And so it has to come from an infinite potential, an infinite power with infinite understanding. So it's like the same old saying that, the scientists will get to heaven one day and they'll see that or they'll get to heaven. Nobody. The scientists are going to climb some hill somewhere and finally find the truth, and they'll see that the goat herders were already there at the top of the hill. So then, it's what the evidence shows. If you want to follow the evidence, that's what the evidence shows. It's infinite potential. All your mathematical equations of whichever way you go is infinity. If you go in, it's infinite. If you go out, it's infinite. No matter which way you go, it's infinite potential, infinite possibilities, and that's the definition of God, because God is defined as all-knowing, all-powerful, and eternal. So the Bible got it right from the very beginning. From the very beginning. So we Christians can't lose an argument ever, because only your Maker can be your Savior. Only your Maker can remake you again. Nobody else can. And our hope is in our Maker. And of course we have fallen. We have violated the perfection of our Maker. All our sin is on and against our Maker, and so He has to provide for us Himself, because nobody else can. And all we have to do is tell the truth. There's no good reason not to tell the truth. And that truth is that only your Maker can perfectly cover for you Himself and remake you again from the inside out by the power of His true word, as no one else can. That's the absolute truth. There is no other truth.